Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
And I believe we are live.
Hello. I think we're live now.
Let's see. Hey, I can hear you. Awesome.
Cool. Well, that's good. So,
Yep, we are live. I'm here joined by, and I am here today joined by David Sharratt of Alternative Facts, formerly known as Spinosaurouskin. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing all right. How about you? Hello?
I'm doing
Hello, can you hear me? Oh.
I'm doing very well.
Is there some kind of lag going on? So a lot of delay between responses.
I'm having a bit of an audio delay, so we're just going to have to deal with that.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I got a bit of a lag. All right, my first question is, tell my audience, many may not be aware of who you are and what you do. Tell them a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, my channel name is Alternative Facts. It's a bit of a jab at the Trump administration and right-wing propaganda in general. And it's something I'm now trying to focus on a bit more is mostly criticism of right-wing politics, since I think it's mostly glossed over when, especially in online discussions, there's a lot of people criticizing the left with this sort of laser focus attitude, where anything a left-winger does is just jumped on instantly. But then when it comes to right-wing politics, especially with the Conservative Party in the UK, it seems that criticism is few and far between and very often glossed over. So I think I'm here to try and redress the balance a bit.
Okay, very good. My second question is, you see yourself as both a men's rights activist and a leftist. What would you say to someone who thought these are contradictory?
I'd say that they're not contradictory. Both left-wing and right-wing politics has not been very friendly to men's rights advocacy in the past, and it's just a. I think the only politician in the UK that's even sympathetic to men's rights issues is Philip Davies, and even and as much as I can disagree with Philip Davies on general politics, I can still support the men's rights work he's doing. And I think this is just the point, that it's the same case as, I don't know, being a pro-free speech left winger or a right winger. It doesn't seem to. There's anti-free speech activists on both sides, as we have seen very recently. So I don't think that men's rights is a position that is necessarily left wing or right wing.
Yeah, I've always thought the same thing myself. I mean, people have always said that the men's rights movement was reactionary, but if you actually look into a lot of their positions, they often seem very progressive. For example, in opposition to male circumcision and such things.
Yeah, it's with opposition to male circumcision, with opposition to with advocacy of male reproductive rights when it comes to domestic violence and rape, where it's expanding it to a less gendered interpretation. If you look at, especially when it comes to the Duluth model of domestic violence, it's pretty much purely a hetero. I'm going to use an SJW buzzword now, a heteronormative view of domestic violence. So not only does it harm male victims of female violence, but it's also going to sort of throw the LGBT community under the bus. And I think that this is really something that a lot of people they sort of ignore when it comes to men's issues, is that the gendered aspects within some feminist circles and some feminist rhetoric doesn't just hurt men. It hurts everyone who isn't a straight woman. So yeah, I think men's rights is, at least in its more pure form, rather than how it is
I've actually heard in a study among homosexual couples.
Oh, in men's rights, in its more pure form, rather than the sort of in practice situation, it's a very it is progressive. It's just that
if
in practice, it's just the problem that there are quite a few reactionary individuals within the movement.
Sorry, the audio delay messed up that question, but I read in domestic violence cases that you brought up that male homosexual couples have like the lowest rates of domestic violence, whereas among lesbian couples have actually the highest, which is very curious.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is why I don't like the idea that domestic violence is to do with masculinity, because if that's the case, then why is it something that occurs in female-female relationships rather than male-male relationships? And even within heterosexual couples, it's pretty much equal as when it comes to women and men. So to blame it on views of men doesn't make sense. It is just completely illogical. And which is why I think that domestic violence is actually at least the Duluth model of domestic violence is actually a very tradcon and even arguably, shall I say, patriarchal view of domestic violence.
Moving on to a new topic, what are your thoughts of the recent British elections, and how do you think they'll affect Brexit?
The recent British election is a very interesting situation that we've put ourselves in. We wanted a strong and stable government under the leadership of Theresa May, and we got a coalition of chaos under the leadership of Theresa May. It's a I think that Labour really couldn't have done any better than they did. especially with the popularity that Corbyn was, like how hated Corbyn was before the election. I don't really blame Theresa May for calling a snap election at that point, because she really thought that she would win. But then mistake after mistake, disaster after disaster, the Tories just, it was almost like they wanted to sabotage the election. And then they basically they didn't gain a majority. And I don't know how this is going to affect Brexit negotiations specifically, but the way that the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, who are in a coalition with the Conservative Party at the moment, they disagree on how Brexit should be done. If the DUP decides to not go through with an agreement, effectively the Tories can't do they can't do it. They won't have enough seats to vote on to actually get a motion through. So it actually makes me think that Brexit might end up being, as a process, slowed before we actually before the end of this year, and some stuff may end up being postponed. I don't know.
All right. How do you respond to some who've actually been theorizing, many conspiracy theorists theorizing that Theresa May have deliberately sabotaged her chances with their various blunders during the campaign in order to sabotage Brexit?
It's entirely possible, but I'm gonna put that up with the whole SJWs are an FBI and CIA conspiracy. It's sort of one of those things that I don't really think we're going to be able to prove, but I mean, it could work. It could entirely be true that this election was a massive blunder purely to try and stop Brexit. But then at the same time, I had heard that there is going to be there could very easily be a second election on Brexit, or at least a second referendum on Brexit. So after we get the deal, we get to actually vote on whether we go through with this deal, and I think that's much better than the idea of whatever government we choose now just gets to decide whatever we do. And then we just have to sort of take the deal that we get. So I don't know. It's possible that it's not even going to happen at this point. And I've always been on the fence with Brexit, so I don't really know. I don't really know what I want. It just doesn't look like there's anything good either way.
You mentioned you're on the fence about Brexit. Do you really think the future of Britain outside the EU is strong, or do you think a major blunder could possibly happen?
I think we're significantly less economically stable outside of the EU. But it's my fear is more the actual deals we will end up having to make. Since there was a situation where Jeremy Corbyn asked Theresa May specifically, are you going to sacrifice selling off more of the NHS to the US in a trade deal? And she just dodged the question, and then someone else asked her the exact same question, and she just dodged again. So it's looking like it's not really Brexit itself that's the problem. It's the deals that the Conservative Party are going to do are the problem.
Okay. All right. You mentioned you're an opponent of privatization. I believe you did a video on that and the Conservative Party's moving towards privatization. What would you say to more libertarian-minded person across the pond like me who would be all for privatization, and someone like me who believes that the private sector is naturally more efficient than any government bureaucracy could be?
The private sector may very well be more efficient in certain situations, but that efficiency comes with accessibility. That when you increase the and even then, arguably, it's not necessarily more efficient, but because there's in the US there are insurance companies, and those insurance companies have entire departments dedicated to finding loopholes to deny you service, to deny you coverage on whatever medical issue you have. It's a very complicated and very confusing system for most Americans to even know what their healthcare even covers. So I don't think that I think that healthcare is such a necessary issue that it really can't be dealt in a for-profit system. What the NHS really gives us is a collective buying power, and it gives us a free at the point of access situation. So it doesn't matter if you're homeless, you're unemployed, you're a child, or you're and it doesn't matter if you have some kind of pre-existing condition. You are going to get covered. You are helped. You aren't denied service, and you're not going to go bankrupt over your medical bills. I mean, it comes with that. It comes with maybe a slight increase to tax. Maybe it comes with a few less choices on whatever gold or bronze.
But one issue that's very often raised is that Britain. Longer delays in its in access to treatment compared to the United States.
The delays in access to treatment are actually more to do with the government funding cuts. The problem is, and this is actually something I explained in my video, is that the reason that our NHS is effectively not as efficient as it used to be is not because it's a public system, but because our government is trying to make it a private system. That they are taking away funding and then using that as an argument to privatize it and sell it and sell more of it off. There's money being funneled into the NHS right now, specifically to pay parts of the NHS to sell itself off. That's hilariously inefficient. It's not even hilariously inefficient. It's just clearly it's privatization at the cost of we're being taxed to privatize our system. This isn't something that a libertarian libertarians or like left-wingers or right-wingers should agree with. This is something that is purely for our government to get rich, and purely for donors and bankers and just people who are rich to get rich off of, well, making our services worse. I mean, imagine the police were told that the only way they could raise money for the police was to sell off assets from the police, and now certain police stations were run by private companies. That would be kind of scary.
Very good. Change of subject again. What made you come across my channel? You liked my response to Paul Joseph Watson. Tell me more about what you thought of that.
Um, Paul Joseph Watson is he's an interesting character, since he's clearly like he's sort of like self-aware about his partisanship. Like he knows that he has sort of double standards for the right and left, and just completely is completely aware that he is so he's pandering to a base almost. And I have to give him credit that he does oppose a lot of more authoritarian actions on the right, but at the same time, he still does act like a bit of a hack every now and then.
A bit of a hack.
Yeah, and I have to admit, like when he talks about things like, especially when he's talking about things like depression, or when he's talking about just
the thing about that video. Awkward silences, but the thing about that video that really like angered me when I saw it, it was my first non-movie review video I did on this channel, was I myself am on the autistic spectrum, so his just ignorance about what people with depression and mental issues go through on a daily basis, it kind of really pissed me off, and I really feel the kind of misinformation he was spreading there is actually quite damaging to the millions and millions of people who have various depression and mental illnesses.
Yeah, and it's ironic because on one hand he's talking about how certain conditions are purely this conspiracy to sell you drugs, and he works for fucking InfoWars. That like super male vitality and whatever some kind of shield thing that they also sell, that is a conspiracy, that is a ploy to sell you drugs. And I think that's kind of why he's doing it, because then on one hand it obviously it's like, don't buy their drugs, buy our drugs. And that works for a lot of conspiracy theorists. And at the same time, anyone who then points out that they're scammers and that the actual scientific community aren't scammers, so that they can call hypocrisy, which is quite ironic, but it's part of the general political discourse these days.
It reminds me of how this one kind of like crazy out there conspiracy site called Natural News, how it had publishing articles saying the Zika virus was all like a secret government plot, that it wasn't real, but it was also selling things that would supposedly help protect against the Zika virus in its ads on the same site, which in my opinion is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, it is very it's extremely amusing to watch these like conspiracy theorists like talk out of both ends of their mouth to pander to pretty much any base, because there's so many conspiracy theories and so many of them conflict, so they have to work out some way to pander to both. And I don't know how Alex Jones especially does it, because he'll on one hand pander to the people who don't think climate change exists and that man-made that anthropogenic climate change is a complete myth, and then on the other end he'll talk about how these chemtrails are causing are a conspiracy by the globalists to heat the Earth. And then he was asking Paul Joseph Watson, who doesn't believe climate change is real, why people are trying to heat the Earth. And it was just extremely amusing to watch his confused reaction.
Yeah, if you're going to pick a crazy out there unscientific conspiracy theory, you should at least stick with it. More questions. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Darn it. Let me see. Did I lose him? Another question. Why did you rebrand yourself Alternative Facts when you originally called yourself Spinosaurouskin? What was your main reason for rebranding yourself in such a way?
I wanted to avoid a lot of the YouTube drama that's going on at the moment, and I have actually sort of I've just started to dislike the YouTube name Spinosaurouskin, so I just thought it might be worth a bit of time for change while I'm sort of going through a bit of a political evolution myself.
Okay. Back to the subject of kind of extremism in politics. One big issue that's been on the minds of a lot of people in my country has been the recent shooting of Steve Scalise by a supposed left-wing extremist. And there's been some backlash about various forms of rhetoric from the right, basically anti-Trump rhetoric. A big thing was this one play in New York Central Park that kind of depicts a play of Julius Caesar, but it makes Julius Caesar look like Trump during his assassination scene. And there's been a lot of talk about the extremism of rhetoric. How do you think that'll play out?
Well, I do think that there is arguable criticism of certain extreme rhetoric from left-wing voices. And there's definitely a lot of people who have been very blasé with their views on political violence. And this is a genuine problem that within the left and even within parts of the right with respect to Trump that needs to stop. But at the same time, I think that especially the play of Julius Caesar, and this is something I'm going to go into when I make a video on it, is that it's a tragedy. And if you look at the story of Julius Caesar, it treats the death of Caesar like the fall, as if it causes the fall of Rome. And this is basically saying that killing Trump is actually bad for America, which I completely agree with. The assassination of a president is not a good thing. So yeah, I don't really see why shutting a message like that down is a good idea.
Okay. Well, the main way I look at that is I certainly agree that kind of a mock assassination of Trump seems to be in very bad taste. And I know during the previous presidency of Barack Obama, that would never fly. There would never be any mock assassinations of Barack Obama ever done in any stage plays. If
there was,
it would be like held up as an example of how horrible racists in this country are tearing this country apart. But now that a Republican is in office, all of a sudden that kind of goes out the window. But at the same time, I totally agree with you that what is it? That basically shutting a play like that down really just sends a wrong message. I mean, it is still ultimately free speech.
Actually, the point you made there that there wouldn't be a mock assassination of President Obama, there was 5 years ago. They did an identical play. They do this with pretty much every American president. It's just that there was an outrage over the Obama thing.
Really? Wow, I really didn't know that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how they talk about how polarized politics has become, and they'll talk about how this means that like we can't say certain things because it might, you know, radicalize people or something like that. Or really, what's going on right now is that media itself is also polarized. That people are talking about people are so much more connected to everything that's happening nowadays that it looks like things are going more insane, and terrorist attacks are happening more, and crime is increasing, and so many of these problems are getting worse, when it's not that. It's just that the media is talking about it more.
Yeah, that's a thing. I actually read that currently the 21st century is actually the most peaceful time in world history if you actually adjust to the population size. Per population, like less people are murdered today than they've ever been, for example.
Yeah, that's a really good example, and it's like part of the reason why part of me wants to move away from the sort of apocalyptic fearmongers that I see on a lot of just in the general political sphere. I want to actually talk about real issues that are actually really happening, and not overstate them to think that this is the end of Western civilization as we know it, or something like that, because it's not. We humans are a little better at dealing with certain issues than we pretend to than we pretend we are. Murder is I think terrorist attacks are terrible and they are horrible, but they aren't an existential threat to our civilization. They are a really massive problem, and they are terrible losses of life, and they are a problem that needs to be dealt with. But those terrorist attacks have not caused our country to fall apart. If anything, they've pulled us together more in certain areas.
Okay, that's another good question. But how do you think that the rising Muslim birth rates, well, not rising, but the higher birth rates among Muslim immigrants will play out in Europe's future?
When it comes to the higher birth rates, those tend to only occur for like first generation migrants, and after they have integrated, it just shuts completely down. The best thing you can really do, if you're so concerned about Muslim birth rates or non-white birth rates or something, it's not to talk about getting rid of all the brown people or something. It's to advocate contraception. the problem with with birth rates is not that like a certain demographic is going to increase. It's that we just need to kind of reduce our birth rates in general, because especially with the rise of climate change becoming an ever more important issue, it's getting to the point where we're going to have to learn to deal with a smaller population. We don't really want to increase it, because that's not going to be good for us as a world, for fuck's sake. And with automation increasing, that's going to start reducing the number of jobs as well. It's just not like again, the solution is not for any group to have more kids. It's for every group to have less kids.
I absolutely agree with that in spirit, but I've heard of like many people who've talked about the increasing Islamization of European areas. Like Richard Dawkins was talking about how his science lectures on evolution would be interrupted because all these new Muslim immigrants were very hostile to the theory of evolution. And it has very much made Europe a far less secular place than it used to be.
I wouldn't know about it being a less secular place than it used to be, because Europe has always had some issues with secularism. But I definitely think that there are some problems that are getting worse that need to be dealt with. I don't, and I definitely think that this is more to do with the fact that the Muslim population is very heavily linked to radical mosques and is encouraged to stay closed off from the rest of society, which means that in their most important years, kids are developing under a very authoritarian and strict ideological narrative, and that's hard to break a kid out of. That's especially when they're 18, 19, and they come to uni. It's just not easy to do something like that. So I really think that the solution is to actually help with integration, is to pull apart these like faith schools that we have in the UK, is to make sure that teachers encounter and confront this stuff at a young age, and therefore it's going to be much easier to deal with in the long run.
Yeah. One study I heard that really did kind of frighten me was one that said that first generation Muslim immigrants who were born in European countries were actually more radical on average than their parents who came from Islamic nations. That's very, very frightening. And that says something very negative about the way Islamic immigrants are being integrated into European societies.
Yeah, the reason that's happening is to do with the fact that most of our extremism is homegrown. That in the UK we have a lot of Saudi-funded mosques, and these mosques are really radical. And in a lot of cases, they're more radical than the countries they came from. And it's why I don't think this is to do with immigration. I don't think this is to do with like the increase in migrants. I think this is to do with issues that already exist in the country that are only being sort of highlighted or exacerbated by immigration.
Okay. Well, you yourself were a bit of the center of controversy after that London Bridge attack, because someone was sharing around a picture of you, I believe. Wasn't there like a Times article, I believe, published about it, that you were like missing near the attacks and it was purely as a prank? How did you deal with that?
I had I had to contact a couple family members just to make sure that they didn't think that I was actually in London at the time. But outside of that, it wasn't really a huge issue for me. I was more concerned with the fact that it was going to make people at the scene who had seen that on Twitter, who didn't realize that it was some alt-right troll account, and start looking for someone and wasting their time. Because at this point, there are a lot of NGOs and sort of outreach programs and emergency services who will be monitoring social media for these things. So it's really a dangerous game that people are playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember V like retweeted that, and I thought that was really, really loathsome of that guy doing that.
Yeah, that it was. I just don't have the energy to get angry at that shit anymore.
Yeah, but I'm just like, you shouldn't have had to deal with that. That just really shocked me when I saw what was going on there. Someone in the chat is saying V is a dick. Yeah. um, on a more lighthearted subject matter, are you a fan of movies? And what you think is the best one released in 2017 so far?
I do like watching movies, but I'm not really actually. I haven't watched many recent releases uh, that recently, so I couldn't actually tell you what my favorite movie released in 2017 is. I'm poor, so I can't go out and watch movies.
I understand. I'm poor too, so it's cool. See, someone in the chat is asking about the burning tower in London. What do you think about? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, from what I know, the tower only really was as bad as it was, and the situation, because to do with the fact that the Tories have not been very good with their safety regulations, and there should have been sprinklers installed there, but there weren't any because the Tories had cut certain programs. So yeah, there's a lot of people who want to say don't politicize a tragedy like that, but it's sort of like this is sort of like saying if someone steals my car keys and then I can't drive my friend to the hospital, and then by the time the ambulance gets there, they die. I'm not allowed to blame the guy who stole my car keys, because that's like blaming someone for a tragedy. This is a situation where the blame is pretty obvious and pretty clear.
Right, I see your point there completely. That people will always say hindsight is 2020, but you do need to highlight where mistakes were made after a tragedy in order to prevent a future tragedy.
Yeah, exactly. That this is a sort of this should be a warning to basically the entire government to say, look, these safety regulations are important. They can actually kill people if they're not put in place. So yeah, that's all I can really say about that. At the moment, there's not really a huge amount of controversy that happened over that fire.
Hmm. Okay. Another question. Someone in the chat is asking about Kraut. What was your opinion of that long video he made attacking you and a few other people? What was it? Like Creationist Cat and what have you, saying that you were like not serious about the problem of Islamization. How would you respond to a lot of the stuff he said about you and others in that video?
Well, if we're talking about the hour-long video about being friends with social justice, that was it was a smear piece where Kraut blatantly lies in multiple places. If you actually, one example is the case where Kraut says that Vadim or Creationist Cat deflects criticism with just "I'm a joke, I'm a comedic cat," and then you actually look at the screenshot of the comment he shows, and it's an actual refutation of the points that the other person is making. And he misrepresents people. Someone who called the Count Dankula Nazi Pug Guy, which is his actual nickname, and says that he's calling Count Dankula a Nazi. And he misrepresented a lot of people in that video, including myself. And it just looked like Kraut was acting out of desperation rather than out of any real concern for social justice warriors.
I remember you were on his channel last year to discuss Edgy Sphinx, how he was secretly like an undercover Nazi or something, and Crowd cited you very favorably back then. How did you and him kind of fall out of favor with each other?
Well, I fell out of favor with Kraut because I asked him about some Twitter rage he had, and I just wanted to know like the situation, and I told him not to beat himself up over it. And I said, look, I'm not attacking you. I just wanted to know what the hell went on. And he said, look, I was it was just another rage, and yeah, I shouldn't have said that. And then starts acting like I was being um, a social justice warrior for asking a friend about some conflict he'd been in, and I got very confused. And then soon after, Kraut started getting very angry at a follower of mine and now a friend of mine, who just asked him like why he very often does generalize Muslims, and at this point he was actually generalizing Middle Easterners. Um, and at this point, so she asked him like why he was being so painting with such a broad brush, and he just exploded on her with so many accusations that made absolutely no sense. And I defended her for it, and he said that I was working with the SJWs or something. I'm confused. I don't know what happened there, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a bit of a problem I've noticed a lot in the skeptic community, that just talking to the other side just seems like haram to some people. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with talking to people you disagree with. I mean, I probably disagree with you on a lot of stuff. Like I said, I'm a libertarian. I'm probably center right in most of my views, but we're having a very good chat right now, you know?
Yeah, it seems that it's okay to talk with Nazis and white nationalists and just anyone on the far right, but if you go to some moderate social democrat who's a bit politically correct, maybe, then, or if they identify as a feminist, then instantly that's a crime. That must be worse than a Nazi or something. I don't even know at this point. Politics has become insane on the internet.
Right. That's supposed to be what makes us different on this side, that over like someone like Steve Shives, who just blocks everyone if you have the slightest disagreement. That's like the worst thing you can be, in my opinion. You really always have to be willing to listen to people with different perspectives on things. It's really how you know if you're right or wrong, is if you engage with a lot of different people with a lot of different perspectives. That's always been my philosophy. That's always why I've always just loved debates. I've always jumped headfirst in any kind of debate I can get my head in. That's how I've always saw things, and I think that really helps you learn and grow.
Yeah, I think that is it is worthwhile to actually listen to people with different views. And obviously there's like I think there like people have a right to an Overton window as well. So I think that if they just don't want to talk to like people with a certain political view, let's say they're black, so they don't want to talk to white nationalists who hate black people, I'm not really going to have an issue with them. I can't really care if they want to do that, and if someone doesn't want to talk to someone who actually like consistently shit talks white people, I won't have an issue with that. If someone doesn't, if a trans person doesn't want to talk to a TERF, I can't blame them. So there's nuance to it. Like I see there is a lot of things that are worth talking about, and there's loads of different perspectives that are worth talking to, but sometimes sometimes it can be a waste of time, and I don't think anyone should be pressured into it.
Yeah, I do see your point there. Like, there's certain people, like when you try talking to them, that nothing like gets through whatsoever. But I was just saying, as a generalized philosophy, you know, that it's cool to always hear different perspectives on things. Let's see. What do you see yourself doing in the future? How do you plan on regrowing alternative facts into a bigger presence on YouTube to really help you rebound yourself?
I actually have no plan at the moment, no idea. This is yeah, I haven't entirely thought all this through. I'm just sort of making it up as I go along at this point.
Yeah, I know. I understand, because like I've been on YouTube with this channel for almost 2 years now, and I'm still not even at 1,000 subscribers. And you'll see some folks, they'll just put out a video or two and instantly get like 10,000 subs. So I see your perspective, but I just like putting out what I got, making the kind of videos that I like making, and if people like them, great. That's always been my philosophy on things.
Yeah, that's the best kind of philosophy. Is don't make this a don't make it something you dread to do. Don't make it something you would hate to do. Try and have fun, and if you stop enjoying doing YouTube, just stop doing it. And if you don't like the content you're making, change it up. It's not something you have to be afraid of. Damn it. It's falling off.
Yeah, one thing about me is I've always just loved making comedy videos. I really love making people laugh. Like, I always try to crack a few jokes in various videos. Even in a suicide prevention video that I did a few months ago, even though I get into very dramatic territory towards the end, really dealing with philosophical reasons why people should not kill themselves, this and that, I still try to crack a few jokes towards the beginning in order to keep things lively, you know, make people feel good. I've always wanted to make videos that really elevate somebody's mood, whether it's by making them laugh, making them think. I want somebody to walk away from one of my videos feeling they've been enriched.
Yeah, that's really what you kind of want to do is try and, you know, make videos people will enjoy at the same time as making videos that, you know, that you enjoy making. And it's a bit of a balance at times, but it can be genuinely rewarding when you get it right. So yeah.
Here's another fun question. Who do you think is the worst major YouTuber out there? Who do you think is just like the worst human being with a large YouTube channel?
That's actually a really, really good question. I really don't know at this point because there's so many to choose from. I'd actually have to think about that one for a while. I mean, I have my spats with Sargon, but he's definitely not on that list. He's mild compared to some of the other people online. So, yeah, I really don't know, actually.
I actually did a poll on that on my Twitter feed for my Twitter followers, and more than half of them voted on Nesion. The four I kind of picked in the poll to kind of choose between were Nesion, Vegan Gains, Atheism is Unstoppable, and Steve Shives were the ones I picked to choose from, and more than half picked Nesion.
Yeah, Anision is definitely one of the people who's just terrible. Just go away, please. Why does anyone like you? I really don't have as much like hatred for Steve Shives as well other people do. Like I was blocked by Steve Shives before it was cool, and and now it is actually like it's just a meme. He's unblocked me, so it's weird. So yeah, I don't even know anymore.
You're unblocked by Steve? Wow, I'm not. I'm still blocked by the guy. I was blocked within 3 hours of creating my Twitter page. Never tweeted anything at the guy.
That's yeah. That was. I think he's taken off a lot of his block bots now, so you might actually be unblocked now. So yeah, probably worth looking at. Oh my god, this just Twitter is weird. It's a strange place.
I highly doubt it because I both made like a parody video. I made a parody video of the guy where I turned my review of Ghostbusters Answer the Call because a lot of its subject matter dealt with feminism. So what I did there to make the review interesting is I pretended to be Steve Shives, wore a hat, kind of put the same backgrounds behind me, okay? And I did a 5 stupid things about Ghostbusters Answer the Call just to kind of make fun of the guy, and it's peppered with little jabs at him. And if he's seen that video, there is zero chance I will ever be unblocked by him.
That's actually pretty amusing. I might actually go and watch that. Um, like I still think that yeah, there's like genuine light-hearted criticism that needs to be moved. There's still worth
Yeah,
worth
I
talking
highly
about.
recommend you watch it.
Yeah, there's definitely worth there's definitely a lot of this sort of light-hearted and like more intelligent jokes about certain people that I think are much like I don't ever get pissed off about that stuff on the left. It's more it's more like the outright propaganda that pisses me off, where people will talk about like some rando on Twitter saying they hate Trump and want him assassinated. This is representative of all liberals, and then it turns out he's a fucking communist. So um, it does annoy me that this is that there's actual like genuine propaganda. But like, if you want to make a joke video, I don't really care.
Personally, myself, if I were to select who is the worst among those 4, I definitely would have selected Vegan Gains because that guy I genuinely think is like a legitimate like threat to society.
Yeah, he's kind of he should probably be on some kind of police watch list.
No doubt. No doubt about that. Like I'm like worried that he's gonna like go into a KFC and just like throw a fit or something. I'm always worried that that's going to be on the news every day since then. Um, what is his recent video he did where he dressed up as roaming millennial and then like blew a cucumber? I'm like, dude, that is like the worst. That's one of the worst things anyone's ever done on YouTube. I was just watching that and my jaw dropped. I'm like, holy shit, is this guy insane?
That's I might actually go and watch that as well because that sounds actually hilarious. Just to watch it ironically maybe, where it might still be funny. I don't know.
It is kind of funny just because of how batshit motherfucking insane it is. You're just like looking at somebody's total mental breakdown on the air, and he's been pretty much like obsessed with roaming millennial ever since she did that silly little video on veganism. He's just been like hounding her like almost every day since then. It is the guy legitimately is off his nutter.
Well, YouTube.
Um, So, I've been asking you lots of questions throughout this whole process. Do you have any questions for me? How about that?
Um, uh, um, why did you change over from more movie reviews to talking about politics?
That's a very good question. I still do movie reviews. I still try to put those out. Like yesterday, I did like a quick thoughts on Cars 3. I decided to go more to politics because my channel wasn't growing. After like a year and a half, I had less than 200 subs. Then I put out that Paul Joseph Watson video, and it did much better than most of my movie reviews and hits. And then, like a few weeks after that, I did a video response to Ashley Judd, okay, and her TED talk on mean tweets. And that one went crazy viral. Like it had nearly more than a third of the traffic my channel's gotten has just been from that video. And a Thunderfoot added it to his playlist, and it got hundreds and hundreds of comments. And most people seem to like that. So ever since then, I try to do a mix of both movie-based content and more political-based content because it seems that there's a market for both. But movie reviews really take a long time to make. Like one of my loudmouth reviews, like every minute of those is about an hour of work. The political ones are also quicker and faster to do and require a bit less effort and less having to deal with copyright claims on everything. So it just seemed like a less effort way of getting more clicks.
That's a little simple.
Are you there?
Hello?
Yeah. Like I got reviews in production for Land of the Lost, for was another Ice Age 5.
That sounds cool. Uh, can you hear me? My mic is dodgy. I think.
Yeah, you're breaking up. I can barely hear you. I wonder if I lost him. Shit, my mic does this sometimes. Well, I'll wait. Give him a second. See if he gets back. How about anyone in the chat? Does anyone have any questions for either of us in the chat?
Is that better? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you're breaking up, man. I can barely hear you. It's like in fragments. You don't know what to do. Well, I guess we can call it a chat then. Thanks a lot for joining me, David Sharratt. It was a fantastic chat. Oh, we had a good times. All right. And you can feel free to mirror this onto your channel as well. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for joining me, and I hope everyone has a great night. All right. Bye.
Is